Thank you, Phil, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a delight to be here, and especially to hear the addresses this morning from the Queensland Attorney General, Information Commissioner, and Privacy Commissioner. I really like that you're so switched on about the intersection of privacy and technology and how it's going to unfold in the future. As a futurist, I spend a lot of my time going into research labs to see what they're working on and where things are going to be over the next 10 years and beyond. And I spend a lot of time talking to these researchers and innovators at startups in lots of different places around the world. Without a doubt, there are an amazing array of technologies that are coming online right now that are going to create a world in 10 years that may be unrecognizable, and in 20 years may seem straight out of a science fiction movie. These technologies are going to completely disrupt industries like transport, logistics, agriculture, manufacturing. Almost any industry that you can think of is going to be disrupted. But along the way, these same technologies have very, very clear security and privacy implications. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And to do this, I'm going to weave you in and out of the here and now and the future, share some things that I'm concerned about in the here and now, and where this may go over the coming 10 years and beyond. Right now, if I were to describe security and privacy, I would say we are in a state of ongoing war. Every single day, I read of some other hack. Last week, it was Gumtree. There was also a Minecraft hack in the United States. And there were reports that are not substantiated yet that up to 270 million email addresses and names were compromised, including from big social media companies like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail. Just yesterday, the scuttlebutt was that this may have been a false alarm and that this may have been really old data with old passwords. It's yet to play out. But it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. There's always something new that is alarming that comes across my desk. Today, the biggest attack vector is still through computer networks, but mobile phones and other devices like wearables are coming up next. Just out of curiosity, how many in the room are using iOS for your device? Just raise your hands. How many are using Android? Fewer, but still some of you. Well, let me share a little bit about the world of mobile applications. The apps that are on our smartphones are not always what they seem, and Android is particularly susceptible. A classic example of an app that does things it shouldn't is this brightest flashlight free app. Over 50 million people downloaded it and didn't realize that this flashlight was actually spying on their every move and reporting it back to advertisers. Then there's this game called Flappy Birds, right? There are about 300 clones of this on Android, and 79% of those applications contain malware, many of them which let you get at the root access to that mobile phone. That means they can get to any application and any data on your phone. We're seeing more and more mobile banking. How many of you do banking with your phone? Right? Quite a few of you. You might want to be using Apple Pay at some point. If you have these applications on there and you've got malware that's got root access, guess what the cyber criminals can get up to? And then at the end of last year, one that really got me worried came out, and it's called the ACE card Trojan. And this runs on Android, and what it does is it masquerades on top of legitimate applications like banking applications, like Twitter, like Skype, like PayPal, and you're entering this information thinking that you're working with an application that you know, but it's really going off to cyber criminals. It's a big worry. iOS isn't immune either. There's an application or a malware that infects your computer and from there travels up the cord when you sync your phone. It's called WireLurker. There's so many of these things that we really do need to be very diligent about the stuff that we have on our phones, the kind of information that we have, and who's tracking us, who's siphoning off our contact list or doing other things that are perhaps even much more nefarious. Now, one of the other things that I've read very recently is a study out of the United States that talked about how healthcare professionals use their mobile phones. And as it turns out, about 80% of healthcare professionals use their mobile phones in some way, shape, or form connected to their patients. What they also found in this study, and this is US-centric, but there are obvious analogies here, is that 27 million people who had Android also had a healthcare app on their phone, and there was an Android malware infection on that phone. That's a lot. One of the other things that came out of the study that I was really dismayed to hear was that 48% of the people interviewed didn't even use a password or a Touch ID on their mobile phone. So that wasn't limited just to health professionals, but if you think about it, if you've got roughly half the population not even putting in basic protection on their phone, what kind of security is there? So with medical professionals, the thing that's scary there is that they've got your information and my information, and they're sharing it, but they may be exposed to malware, or they may not even have passwords. So we really do need to start paying attention to who else's data we have on our phone in addition to our own. And then we get to this whole idea of protecting our children. And Rachel, you mentioned that in your comments, and so did the Attorney General. We need to protect our children, but at what cost? There's an application that I was looking at called TeenSafe. And what this does is it secretly allows a parent to monitor the stuff on a child's phone. So if you wanted to install it on iOS, all you need is their Apple ID and password. And it allows you to look at all their text, even things that were deleted. It allows you to see a phone log of who they might have called, track their location, all of that. You might argue, well, as a parent, I want to be able to do that. But what if somebody other than the parent has that kind of application? What if your child has shared their password or their Apple ID and let someone else do that? Who might be tracking your child in everything that they do? Or what if it's not being used to spy? Really, that's what it is, spy on a child. What if it's a spouse or a partner or a coworker wanting to use this kind of application too? Now, you sign up to it and you pay a monthly fee, and you probably have a click-wrap terms of agreement, but who's to say that somebody isn't going to lie and track someone that they should not be tracking? I find it kind of creepy, almost as creepy as the connected Barbie doll. Has anyone heard about that? It's a Barbie doll that records what your child is saying. It's connected to the internet, and it uses artificial intelligence, and it plays back stuff to your child based on what she or he may have said. And then as a parent, you can get daily email recordings or weekly email recordings. But it also says in the click-wrap terms that it may be used for other purposes, right? So here you've got this toy, and it, who knows what the Barbie's going to say, right? They may be doing advertising or something else. Or, kids have very vivid imaginations. What if your child says something, just in play, it's fantasy, and 5 years from now, it's out there in the public domain, and it's used to embarrass them or bully them or do something else. We have to really think about what we're doing with these technologies. Then we have a big scuffle that happened a few months ago of the Apple versus FBI, where FBI in the United States had an iPhone purportedly from a terrorist at the San Bernardino event in December. It was an unfortunate incident. Some people died, and the FBI couldn't get into the phone because of the security on the iOS. And they essentially sued Apple and wanted Apple to put in what would amount to be a backdoor for people to be able to use brute force hacking to get into an iPhone. The problem is that once it's there, who's to say it's only law enforcement in a very serious case that would use it? Couldn't cyber hackers use it as well? Or what about scope creep? What I was surprised about in this whole debate, that one of the people who came out and said, this is a really, really bad idea, is a retired General Michael Hayden, who's the former head of the NSA and the CIA, and he said, backdoors in general are a very bad idea because once it's there, you don't know who else is going to use it. And in fact, once hackers know that it's out there, they will very specifically try to go in and break it. Now, as it turned out, the lawsuit was dropped. Apple found a third-party firm that was able to hack into it. They have not disclosed exactly how it was done, but Scuttlebutt in the security industry says that they probably made copies of this drive that's sitting inside the Apple and just used brute force and then created a new copy once it locked up. You need very, very specialized equipment to do that, and of course you need the phone. But these are things that we have to consider. And then we have social media. And, there's this old saying that says there's no such thing as a free lunch. And when it comes to social media, that is so true. We're leaving these digital footprints that capture our lives. A study by Respect Network in the United States showed that with Facebook, if you've got 10 likes on there, Facebook believes that they know you better than a coworker. If you like 150 things, they know you better than a family member, and 300, they know you better than your spouse. That's a little bit scary, right? And then think about services like Google. How much information are you putting out there if you're using Gmail, Google Hangouts, you've got an Android phone, you've got all these applications that you're using for free. What if someone were to hack into your account? How much would they know about you? Are we compromising our safety and security by using all these free services? And what if there was a master hack and they got lots and lots of records from a lot of people? There are some really serious concerns. But in the future, it may go even further than that. There's a movement called the transhumanist movement, where basically a bunch of people want to live forever, right? They want to be able to take their minds and upload it into a computer with all of their memories and associations and pictures and all sorts of stuff, eventually be able to upload it into a robot, and then beyond that, perhaps upload it into some sort of living organism, maybe a clone of a human. So they've got this design that says, how can we take our mind files and create a life beyond our physical living life? Now, there's an interim step, and that is to create these mind files which mimic living people combined with AI to be able to do this kind of emulated personality. One example is this little mini robot called Bina 48, who's modeled after a lady by the name of Bina Rothblatt, who's still living. And you can literally have conversations with Bina, and it has her personality emulated. It's really quite a fascinating development. And in fact, there was a storyline on a TV show called Limitless that used this kind of approximation with this little robot there to help them solve her murder. They queried her robot bust, including her mind file, and figured out who her killer was. What I see right now as the biggest issue when it comes to privacy and security are data breaches. And in particular, identity theft is one that I really worry about. Understand that when there is a privacy breach, it's not just individuals who are impacted, it's businesses too, and it's very expensive. In fact, the more regulated an industry is, the more expensive it is on a per-record basis. But it's more than just money. Let me give you an idea of fallout. About 2 years ago, Target was hacked. 110 million records were compromised, including about 40 million attached to credit cards. The CEO was sacked. The cost is estimated to be out about $1 billion US. It impacted the company's reputation to the point that in the quarter immediately following the hack, profits dropped by 46%. So as a company director, you need to be really worried about privacy and security too, because it will impact your bottom line. Here's another classic example of a hack that has impacted a company as well as individuals, and that's the Ashley Madison hack. Ashley Madison is a website, or was a website, for adulterers. Once they were hacked, people's lives were destroyed. Now, admittedly, people shouldn't have been cheating like that, but a lot of people had marriages fail specifically because of this. The company is likely to go out of existence, and it's even worse than that. The CEO was sacked pretty much right away, but in investigating this hack, they found that the company was engaging in deceptive practices. With about 34 million users, only about 15% were women, and a lot of those profiles were inactive. So they're likely to have charges filed against them for deceptive conduct. And they found that the former CTO had hacked into a competitor's website as well. So the ramifications are going to be ongoing, and it's estimated that it will cost about 850 million US all up. That's big dollars. And then there was another huge hack a little while ago, less than a year, at the Office of Personnel Management in the United States. So this is the US office that does the security vetting for spooks and for others who have very sensitive access to all kinds of information. And because of the nature of what these people are doing, this office was collecting everything you can imagine about you as a person and your family, your date and place of birth, everybody that you've ever had contacted with, the people that you've traveled with, the places that you've gone, your social security number, and your fingerprints. Now, imagine that you're a spy. With this database hacked, you can never be a secret agent if they can get to your fingerprints. What are you going to do? Burn off your fingers? What if you can imagine never being able to use Touch ID on a smart device? Now, these things are happening, and this was a secure agency. And by the way, the head of the agency lost her job over this as well. So I worry about this stuff a lot. So then, in the mix of all this, we have what we're doing in Australia, and we passed the data retention legislation last year, and that's basically compelling telcos and ISPs to retain for a period of 2 years metadata, which basically tracks, your phone calls, the websites you visit, all kinds of information. The cost to the telecommunications industry is huge, and one of the reasons is that they have to integrate these disparate databases into a central repository. Now, in the security world, one of the best ways to prevent being hacked is to actually have separate databases, but yet we're doing the opposite. One of the things that is likely to be an unintended fallout of this is that a lot of small ISPs, because of this cost and not knowing what will be reimbursed, and a lot of it not being reimbursed, will actually be forced out of business. But it goes beyond this. It was sold to the public on the basis of security. We want to prevent terrorism. But the organizations that are getting access to this without a warrant are companies like WorkSafe Victoria. It's worker compensation and safety, or the Racing Commissioner, or the Civil Aviation Authority. Now, I'm sorry, I can understand that there may be legitimate law enforcement reasons to get information, but without a warrant? What happens if one of these telcos are hacked? You're looking at a lot of very, very private information that could be used against people, and there are real costs to this. And there's scope creep. And then we have the latest, how shall I say, I'll call it stupidity, because that's what I think it is. And that is by the ABS, an organization that I respect immensely, except in this instance. They want to retain your name and address and store it with your census answers. They're creating a honeypot for hackers of all kinds of information that can be used for identity fraud. And if they think that it can't be hacked, I think they're fooling themselves. If the U.S. Office of Personnel Management can be hacked, why can't the ABS be hacked? And frankly, a lot of cybercrime is done from the inside. It's not just hackers. If there's a lot of money attached, couldn't somebody be corrupted? I think that we're putting the integrity of census data at risk if people try to protect their privacy. Is this the end of the cash world? You know, we're putting more and more on our digital wallets, and Australia is one of the leading organizations, or leading countries to do this. With cash, we have anonymity. With everything recorded on credit cards or FPOS statements, there is no such thing as a private transaction. And then we have cryptocurrency, and of course that's something that governments are worried about too. So let's take a quick step into the future on some of the emerging technologies and where this is going to go over the coming 10 years. I talked about wearables, and one of the trends in the enterprise space is to be able to take biometric data that is tracked by wearables and use it to do things like maintain the safety of employees. There's an experimental wearable that not only tracks things like your heart rate and your pulse and others easily obtained biometrics, it's able to do molecular analysis and track what's in your sweat. So a few weeks ago, I was talking to a group of CEOs about the use of wearables, and this discussion came up about, well, can I actually force an employee to wear a wearable? And my view is that if it's not in their employment contract, no, but will employment contracts of the future include that? And what if it's used not just to help with safety, but to make decisions about hiring or firing? You know, there'll be a time when our smart clothing is able to be used, for instance, in a call center to sense when somebody's getting flustered. You know, is that something that we want to do in a workplace? And what are the implications? And of course, a lot of these devices don't even have security affiliated with them. And what happens if this data becomes corrupted? You may find as an organization that your big data pool that you're relying on is a corrupt data pool. Then there's a technology called augmented reality, and basically what that is a contextual overlay on the things you see. So a few years back, you probably would have heard of Google Glasses. Some of the newer eyewear are from companies like Meta, the Meta 2, or the Microsoft HoloLens, or this DAQRI smart helmet, where they're being used in an enterprise situation, let's say to look at a range of pipes and have a view of what's in the pipe and how hot it is and which way you should turn the knob. Really interesting stuff, but these smart eyewear have lots of glasses so that there's two-way dialogues. So as we're starting to record things, not just from CCTV cameras, but from the eyewear that we wear, there are other obvious privacy implications as well. And then we have facial recognition. And as discussed earlier today, CCTV cameras are becoming more and more pervasive. And there's a couple kinds of facial recognition. One that you're familiar with probably as you go through customs is what you would call cooperative recognition, where you've got a picture of you and you're standing in front of a camera and it's best lighting possible, and they're just trying to do a match. They're not actually looking at other databases to see if you might be a terrorist or a criminal. And even with that, there's a 20% failure rate. In fact, it never works with me. Don't know why, 100% failure rate. It goes beyond that there. A researcher here at QUT, who has a company called Imagis Technology, Brian Lovell, has designed algorithms that allow you to detect faces in a crowd at an angle from CCTV. And it goes beyond that too. So it's not just recognizing individual faces, it's being able to look at emotions and being able to classify genders and reactions to things like advertising. But what if a facial database was hacked? You know, one of the problems with these facial recognition databases is that the bigger the database, the more pictures you have, the greater the chance there is of false recognition. And not only that, but what if somebody takes a picture of criminals and sticks your picture in there instead, and suddenly you're being targeted and harassed because you're thought to be a criminal? You have to suddenly prove that you're not who this facial recognition database is. It gets a bit crazy. In about 7 years' time, it's going to get even crazier. One of the things that the technology industry is working on are smart glasses. And this is an example of a patent from Google, where the eyewear that you'll wear will probably, by the time this comes out, most certainly, the opaque bits will be completely translucent. So you'll have these contacts in your eye, and you'll be able to blink twice and start taking a picture or a video just with your eyes. And not only that, but it will combine biotech too. So you'll be able to have things like auto-focusing lenses, so no more reading glasses. You'll be able to detect all kinds of medical situations from the information in your tears. So there'll be good reasons for people to adopt that. Put this together with facial recognition, and imagine going into a room like this and seeing everybody's name pop up. That's where we're going to be in about 7 to 10 years. And then we have flying robots and drones. And more, we're going to see them in our skies. In fact, we're probably in 10 years' time going to see drone highways, out the window here. They're loaded up with cameras, and they can do all kinds of things. And there are lots of legitimate reasons to use them, but they can also be used for spying and surveillance. Last week I was at CeBIT, and I was talking to one of the vendors of drone technology, and they're getting quieter too, right? Drone that has a high-definition camera and a separate infrared camera would sell for about $3,200. They're getting cheaper and cheaper all the time, and they're getting smaller. Military organizations like the U.S. Air Force are working on these little tiny, teeny drones that look like insects. If this was perched on a shelf in your board meeting, would you know that it's there? Or in your house? Who knows who might have access to this kind of technology? So, will we have any privacy in 10 years' time? And, sometimes I worry, I think it might have already missed the boat. I hope not. But so many times, security and privacy is an afterthought. And how we use technologies, the ethics of it, is an afterthought. Now, there's one new technology that seems straight out of science fiction that may protect us at some stage from ongoing surveillance cameras. And it's an invisibility shield. I mean, seriously, have you ever wanted to be invisible? This came out in a scientific journal just a few weeks ago, and what scientists at Iowa State University are doing is they have this liquid metal called Gallenstad that's got a slightly open loop, and it's embedded in a silicon mesh, and it's able to be tuned to block out radar signals. So you can imagine that there are some real good application for wanting to not show up on radar. But where they are intending to go with this is to be able to take the frequency higher and be able to block out infrared light or visible light. So imagine sometime in the future you're wearing clothes that have these little alloys as part of them, and you don't show up on cameras. Or, maybe you have makeup, and, therefore your face doesn't show up either. That might be a really interesting technology. Then people will have to think about, what about all these CCTV cameras? What are we going to do with these things? I think we're at least 10 years away from any kind of commercial application. I'm sure it will be used in military and security applications before you see it in the general public. But where does it go even beyond there? And this is where it gets a little bit spooky, sci-fi, scary. One of the world's leading futurists, Ray Kurzweil, has predicted that in the 2030s, we will have these little nanobots that go directly into our brain. They'll be made out of DNA. They'll connect directly to our neocortex and allow us to do things like think a question and Google it, just from your brain. Or you want to send an email to someone or communicate with someone, and you just send it brain to brain. You have a complex problem where you need more computing power. No problem. Fire it up like an Amazon web server, and suddenly you've got 10,000 times the computing power that you have in your natural human brain. Or you want to record every single one of your life memories, everything that you see and do. No problem. Store it in the cloud. Is this science fiction? Well, there's a lot of work happening in the world of nanotechnology and in very, very, very tiny robots. Where we don't know yet is exactly how the human brain works. Enough to be able to do that. Will we solve it in 15 years or 20 years? Maybe, maybe not, but at some point we will. Once you have internet connections literally in your brain, will we have any privacy at all? What if everything that we think and do is someday stored in the cloud? And what if somebody hacks your brain? If you've got a computer and you've got a backup, you can wipe it. But what are you going to do? Wipe your brain? These are the places where technology is going, and it's just so important that we have these discussions on security and privacy and ethics now, while the technology is still being thought about and hasn't been deployed yet. And so many times I see in technologies, both in the here and now and in the emerging path, that security is an afterthought, that privacy is an afterthought, that ethics are not even considered. Think about things like smartwatches. There was a study done last year where half of them don't even have basic PIN protection built in. That's nuts. Why would you build a product, in 2015, 2016 without basic security? But we continue to do that. So these discussions that we're having here today are so important. And as we ponder these issues, we really need to look at the big picture, and that is, what kind of a world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where everybody knows everything about us, and maybe it can be used to hurt us or hurt our family? Or do we want to live in a world where privacy is part of our lives, where we still have a chance to have some things that we choose not to share with the rest of the world, not because they're illegal, but just because they're personal to us or to our families? Thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the proceedings.